3 hours before receiving my doctorate in biomedical engineering from Stanford University, I called my parents with pure excitement bubbling through my voice. 8 years of relentless study research and sacrifice had led to this moment. Mom Sarah answered on the second ring, her tone strangely casual. She mentioned she could not attend because Tyler was hosting his neighborhood barbecue party, and she had promised to help with potato salad preparation. When I expressed shock, Dad Frank grabbed the phone, dismissing my devastation with those crushing words that still echo today. "Don't be so dramatic, son. It's just a ceremony." In that instant, I realized my parents had chosen my brother's casual backyard gathering over my doctorate graduation. The graduation ceremony passed in a blur of burgundy robes and academic regalia, but I felt completely hollow inside. Surrounded by hundreds of families celebrating their loved ones, I sat alone in the designated family section, staring at two empty chairs that should have held the people who mattered most. Every time another graduate's name got called, and their family erupted in cheers, the silence around me grew more deafening. My phone buzzed with congratulatory texts from friends and professors, but nothing from home. After the ceremony ended, and I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I found myself sitting on a campus bench, still wearing my graduation gown, holding the degree I had worked so hard to earn. The weight of the moment should have felt triumphant, but instead, it felt completely meaningless, without anyone to share it with. I kept replaying the phone conversation, trying to understand how my parents could have simply forgotten the most important day of my academic career. The rational part of my mind kept making excuses for them. Maybe they had genuinely mixed up the dates. Perhaps Tyler's barbecue had been planned long before I sent them my graduation information. I wanted desperately to believe there was some innocent explanation that would make this terrible feeling in my chest disappear. So I decided to call Tyler, expecting he would share my outrage and help me understand what had happened. Tyler picked up on the fourth ring, and I could hear music and laughter in the background. The sounds of his party, the event my parents had prioritized over my graduation. I forced myself to speak calmly, explaining what had just happened and how hurt I felt by their absence. I expected sympathy, maybe even anger on my behalf. Instead, Tyler's response knocked the breath out of me completely. "Oh man, Victor, I thought you knew." He said, his voice carrying that casual tone people use when they assume everyone is already in on the joke. "Mom and Dad have been planning to skip your graduation for weeks. They specifically picked today for my barbecue because they did not want to sit through another one of your academic ceremonies. Mom said she was tired of pretending to be excited about your achievements." The words hit me like a physical blow. Tyler continued talking, seemingly oblivious to the devastation he was inflicting. "They have been saying you think you are better than everyone since you started that doctorate program. Dad mentioned last month that you always make the rest of us look bad with your fancy degrees and your research stuff. Mom agreed that it was time to stop enabling your show-off behavior." I could barely process what I was hearing. This was not a case of forgotten dates or scheduling conflicts. My own family had deliberately planned to humiliate me on one of the most important days of my life. They had conspired together, discussing my character and deciding collectively that I deserved to be abandoned at my graduation. Tyler kept talking about how they wanted to focus on celebrating normal family stuff instead of my pretentious academic pursuits. The conversation revealed layers of resentment I had never suspected existed. Tyler mentioned overhearing multiple conversations where my parents discussed how my education had made me difficult to relate to, and how they felt more comfortable with his blue-collar lifestyle and neighborhood barbecues. They apparently viewed my doctorate not as an achievement to be proud of, but as evidence that I had grown too big for my britches and needed to be brought down a few notches. After hanging up with Tyler, I sat in my car in the Stanford parking lot for over an hour, still wearing my graduation regalia. Other families walked past, heading to celebratory dinners and taking photos with their graduates. I watched them through my windshield, trying to understand how my own family could be so fundamentally different. The betrayal felt complete and calculated, designed specifically to hurt me when I should have been feeling my proudest. My girlfriend Amanda found me there as the sun started setting. She had been looking forward to meeting my parents after the ceremony, having heard me talk about them for months. When I explained what had happened, her face went through the same cycle of disbelief, anger, and sadness that I had experienced. But Amanda's reaction helped me realize something crucial about the situation. Her shock at their behavior confirmed that what they had done was not normal family dynamics or acceptable treatment of a child's major accomplishment. "Victor, this is not about you being dramatic," Amanda said, her voice filled with the protective anger I wished I had heard from my own family. "This is about them deliberately choosing to hurt you on one of the most important days of your life. Normal parents do not skip their child's doctorate graduation for a barbecue. Normal parents do not plan group punishments for their child's academic success." That night, as I finally changed out of my graduation clothes, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life completely. Standing in my apartment, holding my doctorate diploma, I realized that I had spent 26 years trying to earn love and respect from people who had no intention of giving me either. The systematic nature of their betrayal, the weeks of planning, the casual cruelty in Tyler's voice when he revealed their conspiracy, all pointed to a relationship dynamic that was fundamentally broken and possibly irreparable. I threw my graduation cap into the dumpster outside my apartment building. As I watched it disappear among the garbage, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, sharp and overwhelming, but underneath it was growing a cold determination I had never felt before. If my family could plan my humiliation so carefully, then I could plan my response with equal precision. That night, I started researching what it would take to disappear from their lives completely and build something better in its place. The next morning brought a clarity that sleep had somehow crystallized from the previous day's chaos. I spent hours going through old photo albums and family documents, searching for patterns I had somehow missed during years of accepting their treatment as normal family dynamics. What I discovered made my stomach turn with a mixture of rage and heartbreak that threatened to overwhelm my newly formed resolve. In album after album, the evidence was undeniable. Tyler appeared front and center in every holiday photo, birthday celebration, and family gathering from the past 5 years. But my own presence had been systematically erased from their documented family history. Photos from Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas mornings, 4th of July, barbecues all featured Tyler grinning alongside my parents, while I was nowhere to be seen. At first, I assumed I had simply been away at school during these events, but the dates told a different story. I found my old calendars and cross-referenced them with the family photos. During many of these celebrations, I had been home from graduate school on break available, and assuming I would be included in family plans. Yet somehow, these events had happened without my knowledge, as if I had never existed in their world at all. The realization that they had been having family celebrations without inviting me, then documenting these exclusions in carefully arranged photographs, felt like discovering a secret life my own family had been living parallel to our shared existence. The pattern became even more disturbing when I started reaching out to high school friends I had lost touch with over the years. During casual conversations, several of them mentioned running into my parents around town and asking about me. Each friend received the same response from my parents. They told everyone that I was too busy with school to visit home or participate in family events. They had created a narrative where I was the absent, self-important son who had chosen academic pursuits over family relationships. But I remembered those visits home vividly. I had spent countless weekends and holidays sitting in my childhood bedroom, wondering why my parents seemed distant and uninterested in spending time with me. Now I understood that while I was upstairs, feeling lonely and confused, they were planning gatherings and activities that specifically excluded me. They had been living a double life, presenting themselves to the community as the abandoned parents of an ungrateful son, while actively engineering my isolation from family life. The financial discovery came through my Aunt Martha, my father's sister, who called me 2 days after graduation to congratulate me on my achievement. During our conversation, she casually mentioned how impressed she was that Tyler had been able to help my parents with their financial struggles by contributing $800 monthly to the household expenses. The number struck me as oddly specific, and something in Martha's tone suggested there was more to the story. "It's been going on since you left for graduate school," Martha explained when I pressed for details. "Tyler moved into the basement and positioned himself as the responsible son, who stayed home to take care of the family. Your parents have been telling everyone how grateful they are to have at least one child who prioritizes family over personal ambition." This information hit me like a sledgehammer. Tyler had been paying rent to live in our family basement, while simultaneously convincing my parents that his presence made him more valuable than my absence. He had created a financial dependency that gave him leverage in family decisions and positioned me as the selfish son who had abandoned them for education. The $800 monthly was not just rent. It was payment for his status as the favored child. But Martha was not finished with her revelations. After some gentle questioning, she revealed that my parents had borrowed $15,000 against my college fund during my second year of graduate school. They had told her it was for emergency home repairs, but she had later learned through family gossip that the money had gone toward Tyler's truck purchase and various improvements to his basement living space. Tyler had not only known about this theft of my educational funds, he had actively encouraged it by convincing my parents that my graduate stipend made me financially independent. The web of deception was more intricate than I had imagined possible. Tyler had systematically worked to turn my parents against me by painting my educational pursuits as evidence of my superiority complex and my absence as proof of my selfishness. He had made himself indispensable to them financially, while ensuring that my achievements were framed as personal attacks on the family's working-class values. Every success I had earned was recast as evidence that I thought I was better than them. Martha also revealed that Tyler had convinced my parents to change my emergency contact information at the university from themselves to him. This meant that any academic achievements, medical emergencies, or important communications went through Tyler first, giving him the power to filter information about my life that reached my parents. He had essentially made himself the gatekeeper of my relationship with my own family. The scope of Tyler's manipulation became clear when Martha mentioned overhearing a conversation between Tyler and my parents about my upcoming graduation. Tyler had argued that attending my ceremony would just feed Victor's ego, and that they needed to bring him back down to earth by showing him that his accomplishments did not make him the center of the family universe. He had specifically suggested scheduling a family barbecue on my graduation day to demonstrate their priorities. This revelation transformed my understanding of the previous day's events completely. The graduation abandonment was not a spontaneous decision or even a thoughtless oversight. It was the culmination of a long-term campaign Tyler had waged to isolate me from my family and establish himself as the only child worthy of their attention and respect. He had spent years building a case against me, using my educational achievements as evidence of my character flaws, and convincing my parents that rejecting me was a form of moral correction. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by family photos and documents, seeing my childhood and adolescence through completely new eyes. Every family dinner where I had felt excluded, every holiday where the atmosphere seemed tense, every interaction where my parents seemed distant and critical, all of it made sense now. Tyler had been orchestrating my alienation from the family for years, and my parents had been willing participants in this systematic rejection. I deleted every family contact from my phone that night, but not out of pure emotion. This was the beginning of a calculated response to a calculated attack. If Tyler wanted to play family politics, I would show him what real strategy looked like. I started researching legal name change procedures and planning my complete disappearance from their lives. They had spent years erasing me from the family. Now I would finish the job myself and build something better in place of what they had destroyed. The legal name change process began as a therapeutic exercise, something to help me reclaim control over my identity after years of character assassination by my own family. I spent hours in the courthouse, researching the requirements, filling out forms, and preparing for the hearing that would officially transform me from the rejected family member into someone completely new. The name Victor Chase Sterling felt powerful and professional, carrying none of the baggage associated with my childhood surname. While gathering the necessary documentation for my identity transformation, I decided to be thorough about severing all connections to my past life. This meant reviewing my credit reports, bank accounts, and financial records to ensure nothing would tie my new identity back to the family that had systematically undermined me. What I discovered during this routine financial review changed everything I thought I knew about Tyler's betrayal and launched me into a fury that threatened to consume my newfound sense of purpose. The credit report inconsistencies jumped out immediately. Several accounts I had never opened, purchases I had never made, and debts I had never incurred were listed under my Social Security number. At first, I assumed these were simple reporting errors that could be resolved with a few phone calls to the credit agencies. But as I dug deeper into the documentation, a far more sinister picture began to emerge. Tyler had been using my identity for financial fraud on a scale that took my breath away. The dates on the fraudulent accounts coincided perfectly with my graduate school years when I was too busy with research and studies to monitor my credit closely. He had opened credit cards in my name, taken out loans against my Social Security number, and even leased vehicles using my personal information. The total amount of debt he had accumulated under my identity was approaching $30,000. The investigation I launched into this identity theft revealed the true scope of Tyler's calculated campaign against me. He had not simply been paying $800 monthly to my parents from his own earnings, as I had initially believed. He had been funding his family contributions and his lifestyle improvements with credit cards and loans obtained fraudulently in my name. The basement renovations, the new truck, the barbecue equipment for his parties, all of it had been purchased with my stolen identity. But the financial fraud was just the beginning. Tyler had used my Social Security number to apply for government assistance programs, claiming income levels that qualified him for food stamps and housing aid, while simultaneously living in my parents' basement and earning income from his construction job. He had created a parallel identity, using my personal information, essentially stealing my legal existence to fund his preferred lifestyle and his manipulation of my parents. I hired a private investigator named Jake Morrison to document every aspect of Tyler's criminal activity. Jake was a former police detective who specialized in financial crimes, and his investigation uncovered layers of fraud that went back nearly 4 years. Tyler had been methodically destroying my credit and financial standing while I was focused on my education, creating a situation where my post-graduation life would have been severely compromised by debts I had never incurred. The evidence Jake compiled was devastating. Bank records, credit applications, government assistance paperwork, all bearing my Social Security number, but Tyler's handwriting and signatures. Security camera footage from stores where he had used credit cards in my name. Cell phone records showing him calling financial institutions while impersonating me to increase credit limits and request new cards. The documentation painted a picture of systematic identity theft that had been ongoing for years. Armed with this evidence, I confronted Tyler directly, but not in the emotional, accusatory way he might have expected. I called him and recorded the conversation, presenting myself as someone who had discovered the financial discrepancies and was trying to understand what had happened. Tyler's response revealed both his arrogance and his complete lack of remorse for his criminal behavior. "You never used your credit anyway," Tyler said with casual dismissiveness when I confronted him with specific account numbers and dates. "You were always buried in your books and research projects. Mom and Dad needed help with expenses, and you were not contributing anything to the family. I figured your good credit was the least you could do to help out." His tone carried no shame or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. In Tyler's mind, my identity belonged to the family, and using it to fund his lifestyle and maintain his status as the helpful son was justified by my absence and academic focus. He actually seemed proud of his resourcefulness in finding ways to make my success benefit the family he was actively helping to maintain. When I pressed him about the specific graduation sabotage, Tyler became even more revealing. "We planned that barbecue weeks ago specifically because we were tired of your graduation ceremonies and achievement celebrations," he admitted with satisfaction in his voice. "Every time you got some academic award or finished another degree, Mom and Dad felt pressured to act excited when really they just felt like failures in comparison. I suggested we skip your doctorate graduation to show you that your achievements do not make you more important than regular family events." The recording captured Tyler's complete confession to both the identity theft and the deliberate family conspiracy to humiliate me at graduation. He admitted to years of financial fraud, acknowledged the systematic campaign to turn my parents against me, and revealed the calculated nature of their rejection of my academic achievements. Most importantly, he expressed no remorse for any of his criminal behavior or family manipulation. Jake Morrison helped me compile all the evidence into a comprehensive package that documented federal crimes including identity theft, credit fraud, and fraudulent applications for government assistance. The evidence was so extensive and well documented that Jake assured me Tyler would face serious federal charges that could result in significant prison time. But I decided not to file the criminal complaint immediately. Instead, I used the evidence as leverage to complete my identity transformation with full legal protection. The name change hearing went smoothly with the judge approving my transformation to Victor Chase Sterling without any complications. I left the courthouse with a new birth certificate, social security card, and driver's license, officially severing my legal connection to the family that had betrayed me so completely. That same day, I used Tyler's recorded confession and Jake's evidence package to file fraud claims with every credit agency, clearing my credit report of Tyler's criminal activities and ensuring that his debt would be properly attributed to him rather than my new identity. But I was not finished with my strategic response to Tyler's years of criminal behavior and family manipulation. That evening, I finalized preparations for my complete disappearance from their lives, including a job relocation that would take me far enough away to start fresh, while positioning myself to watch Tyler face the consequences of his choices. I had spent years being the victim of his campaign against me. Now I would be the architect of his downfall. The move to Seattle felt like stepping through a portal into a life that belonged entirely to me, for the first time in years. Victor Chase Sterling had no history of family betrayal, no baggage from years of emotional manipulation, and no connection to the people who had spent so much energy trying to diminish his achievements. I rented a modern apartment in Capitol Hill, furnished it with clean lines and contemporary design that reflected none of the cluttered, small-minded aesthetic of my childhood home. My new position as senior biomedical engineer at Cascade Research Solutions offered everything I had hoped for in a career opportunity. The company specialized in cutting-edge medical device development, and my doctoral research in biomedical engineering positioned me perfectly for their most ambitious projects. My colleagues welcomed me with the professional respect I had craved, treating my academic achievements as valuable assets rather than threats to their self-esteem. Within 6 months of my arrival, I was leading a research team focused on developing advanced cardiac monitoring systems. The work was intellectually challenging and emotionally fulfilling in ways my family had never understood. Every breakthrough felt like validation of the choices I had made, proof that pursuing excellence was worth the personal costs I had paid. My team respected my expertise, valued my input, and celebrated our collective successes without the underlying resentment that had characterized my family relationships. The breakthrough came during my 8th month in Seattle. Our research team discovered a method for creating wireless cardiac monitors that were 90% more accurate than existing technology, while being 60% smaller and more comfortable for patients. The innovation had immediate commercial applications and the potential to save thousands of lives by providing earlier detection of cardiac emergencies. The patent application I filed for this technology would later prove to be worth millions of dollars. Meanwhile, 1,500 miles away in my hometown, Tyler was discovering the consequences of years of criminal behavior and family manipulation. I had arranged for the evidence package Jake Morrison compiled to reach federal authorities through anonymous channels, ensuring that Tyler's identity theft and fraud would be investigated without any connection to my new life as Victor Sterling. The arrest came on a Tuesday morning while Tyler was getting ready for work. Federal agents executed search warrants at my parents' house and Tyler's construction job site, seizing computers, financial records, and documentation that corroborated every aspect of the criminal case against him. The local newspaper covered the story with headlines about "Local Man Charged with Federal Identity Theft." And I read about Tyler's perp walk from my Seattle office with a satisfaction I had never experienced before. Tyler faced charges for identity theft, credit fraud, mail fraud, and fraudulent applications for government assistance. The evidence was so comprehensive that his public defender advised him to accept a plea agreement rather than risk a trial that could result in a much longer sentence. Tyler ultimately pled guilty to multiple federal charges and received a sentence of 5 years in federal prison, with an additional 3 years of supervised probation. My parents lost their house during Tyler's legal proceedings, unable to afford the legal fees, and facing the reality that Tyler's $800 monthly contributions had been funded by criminal activity. They were forced to sell their property to pay for his defense attorney and moved into a small rental apartment in a less desirable part of town. The local news coverage of Tyler's criminal case had embarrassed them within their community, and many neighbors now understood the truth about their favored son's financial contributions. From my new life in Seattle, I watched these developments unfold through online news reports and public court records. The justice felt clean and impersonal, exactly what I had hoped for when I decided to disappear rather than confront my family directly. Tyler was facing the legal consequences of his criminal choices without any dramatic family confrontations or emotional scenes that might have left me feeling guilty about my role in his downfall. My professional life continued to flourish as my personal life finally found stable ground. I started dating Claire Martinez, a research biochemist I met at a medical conference. Claire knew nothing about my complicated family history, which allowed our relationship to develop based purely on who I was as Victor Sterling, rather than who I had been as the rejected family member. Our conversations focused on scientific discoveries, travel plans, and shared intellectual interests, rather than family drama or emotional baggage. The patent for my cardiac monitoring breakthrough was purchased by Meditech Innovations for $2.7 million, establishing me as one of the youngest and most successful biomedical engineers in the Pacific Northwest. The financial security this provided was gratifying, but even more meaningful was the professional recognition from colleagues who appreciated my contributions to their field. Stanford University featured my success story in their alumni magazine, highlighting my transition from recent graduate to patent-holding innovator. My relationship with Claire deepened as I found myself able to trust someone completely for the first time in years. She never pressured me about my reluctance to discuss family or my apparent lack of contact with relatives. Instead, she focused on building a future together based on our shared values and complementary career goals. When she was offered a research position at the University of Washington that would keep her in Seattle permanently, I knew our relationship had found the kind of stability I had never believed possible. A year after Tyler's sentencing, I received a promotion to lead research engineer with a substantial salary increase and equity stake in the company. My team had expanded to include 8 researchers working on multiple projects, and our department had become one of the most profitable divisions of Cascade Research Solutions. The professional success felt deeply satisfying, but more important was the sense of belonging I had found among colleagues who valued excellence rather than resenting it. Reading about Tyler's sentencing in the local newspaper from my corner office in Seattle, I felt a profound sense of closure about the family betrayal that had launched my new life. Tyler would spend the next 5 years in federal prison, which seemed like appropriate consequences for the identity theft and systematic manipulation he had used against me. My parents were facing financial hardship and social embarrassment, which felt like natural results of their choice to enable Tyler's criminal behavior while rejecting my legitimate achievements. But the most satisfying aspect of my new life was not the revenge against my family. It was the realization that I had built something genuinely better in place of what they had destroyed. Victor Sterling had colleagues who respected him, a girlfriend who loved him, and professional achievements that were valued by people who mattered. I had learned that sometimes the best response to betrayal is not confrontation or forgiveness, but simply building a life so successful that the betrayers become irrelevant to your happiness. 2 years and 3 months after I disappeared from their lives, my carefully constructed peace was interrupted by a LinkedIn message that made my blood run cold. Aunt Martha had somehow tracked down my new identity and professional information, sending a brief note that managed to sound both apologetic and urgent. She explained that my parents were facing serious health and financial crises, and she had given them my new name and workplace information, despite understanding my reasons for wanting to stay hidden. The message revealed that Tyler was scheduled for early release from federal prison in 6 months, due to good behavior and completion of various rehabilitation programs. More troubling was Martha's revelation that my mother had been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer and was struggling to afford the treatment her insurance would not fully cover. My father had been laid off from his factory job due to company downsizing and was having difficulty finding new employment at his age. I read Martha's message 3 times, feeling a complicated mixture of emotions I thought I had processed completely during my 2 years of freedom from family drama. The rational part of my mind recognized this as a predictable development. Families in crisis often reach out to the successful member they had previously rejected when they need financial rescue. But underneath my analytical response was a deeper emotional current that surprised me with its intensity. That Thursday afternoon, I was reviewing quarterly research reports in my office when my assistant buzzed me about unexpected visitors who claimed to be family members. Through my office window, I could see 2 people in the lobby who looked vaguely familiar but dramatically aged. It took me several moments to recognize my own parents, standing awkwardly in the professional environment of my workplace, looking small and uncertain, in a way that contrasted sharply with my memories of their confident dismissal of my achievements. My father had lost significant weight, and his hair had gone completely gray, making him appear at least a decade older than his actual age of 58. My mother looked even more dramatically changed, wearing a wig that suggested she had already begun cancer treatment, her face drawn and pale in a way that spoke of serious illness and considerable stress. They both wore clothes that looked clean but inexpensive, the kind of careful presentation people make when they are trying to maintain dignity despite financial hardship. The conversation that followed in my office was one of the most emotionally complex experiences of my adult life. My parents sat across from my desk, surrounded by the symbols of my professional success, while I remained standing behind my chair, maintaining the physical and emotional distance I needed to process their sudden appearance in my carefully constructed new life. They began with apologies that sounded rehearsed, and explanations that felt inadequate for the years of systematic rejection I had endured. "Victor, we know we made terrible mistakes." My mother began her voice, carrying a shakiness that reflected both her illness and her discomfort with having to ask for help from the son she had dismissed. "We realize now that Tyler manipulated us against you, and we should have seen through his lies. We are sorry for missing your graduation and for all the ways we failed to support your achievements." My father nodded along with her words, but I could see in his expression that the apology was motivated more by desperation than genuine understanding of the harm they had caused. "We lost everything because of Tyler's criminal activity." He admitted, his voice carrying the defeated tone of someone who had exhausted all other options before coming to me. "The legal fees, The restitution payments, the shame in our community. We just cannot manage on our own anymore. The request for financial assistance was presented as a temporary loan, something to help them through the medical crisis and unemployment emergency until they could get back on their feet. But I could see in their faces that they understood the power dynamic had shifted completely. The son they had dismissed as pretentious and self-important was now their only hope for financial stability and access to the medical care my mother desperately needed. We heard about your success through Martha. My mother continued glancing around my office with a mixture of pride and discomfort. The patents, the promotions, all the achievements we should have been celebrating with you. We know we do not deserve your help, but I am hoping you might find it in your heart to forgive us and help us through this difficult time. I listened to their prepared presentation while studying their faces for signs of genuine remorse versus strategic manipulation. The physical evidence of their hardship was undeniable: my mother's wig and obvious weight loss, my father's aged appearance and cheap clothing. But I found myself analyzing their words for authenticity, looking for acknowledgement of the systematic nature of their rejection, and evidence that they understood the depth of harm they had caused. My name is Victor Sterling now. I told them calmly, my voice carrying none of the emotion I felt churning beneath the surface. I legally changed my identity when I left your lives, and I have built a new existence that has nothing to do with the family that rejected me. I do not know why you think I would be interested in helping people who deliberately chose to humiliate me on one of the most important days of my life. My mother's carefully maintained composure cracked at these words, tears beginning to flow as she realized that forgiveness would not be automatically granted because of her medical crisis. We know we were terrible parents to you. She sobbed, her voice breaking with genuine anguish. Tyler convinced us that your education was making you think you were better than us, and we believed him, because it was easier than admitting we felt intimidated by your success. This admission represented more honesty than I had ever heard from my parents about the family dynamics that had shaped my childhood and adolescence. For the first time, they were acknowledging that their rejection of my achievements had been based on their own insecurities rather than any actual character flaws on my part. But I found myself wondering whether this insight was genuine or simply another strategic approach to securing my financial assistance. The most shocking revelation came when my father mentioned that Tyler had been writing letters from prison, expressing remorse for his criminal behavior and asking for the opportunity to apologize to me personally. According to my parents, Tyler had found religion during his incarceration and was participating in rehabilitation programs focused on making amends to the people he had harmed. They presented his supposed transformation as evidence that our family could heal from the betrayal and dysfunction that had driven me away. At that moment, Claire appeared in my office doorway, having arrived early for our dinner plans, and been directed upstairs by my assistant. Her presence in the room shifted the dynamic, immediately reminding me that I had built meaningful relationships with people who valued and respected me. Claire knew nothing about my family history, and seeing my parents for the first time, she could probably sense the tension and discomfort that filled the office air. These are my biological parents, I told Claire with careful formality, introducing them by their first names, rather than acknowledging their parental relationship to me. They stopped by unexpectedly to discuss some family business. Claire's training as a scientist had taught her to read social situations carefully, and I could see her processing the emotional undercurrents in the room while maintaining professional courtesy toward my unexpected guests. My parents left that day with a single business card containing my attorney's contact information. I explained that any further communication about financial assistance or family reconciliation would need to go through legal channels, allowing me to maintain appropriate boundaries while considering their requests. This approach would protect me from emotional manipulation while ensuring that any help I provided would be structured to prevent future dependency or exploitation. Watching them leave my building through my office window, I felt a complex mixture of emotions that defied easy categorization. The sight of their obvious hardship and my mother's illness triggered feelings of guilt and compassion I thought I had successfully suppressed. But underlying these emotions was a harder truth about the nature of their request and the timing of their sudden desire for reconciliation with the son they had systematically rejected when he needed their support most. The weeks following my parents' desperate office visit were filled with careful consultation and strategic planning that would determine the terms of any potential reconciliation. My attorney, Rebecca Walsh, specialized in family law and financial arrangements, helping me design a response that would protect my interests while addressing their legitimate health and financial crises. This legal framework would ensure that any assistance I provided came with clear expectations and measurable outcomes, rather than enabling continued dysfunction. The strategic response I developed offered my parents exactly what they had requested: financial help and family reconciliation, but with conditions that would fundamentally alter the power dynamics that had allowed Tyler's manipulation and my systematic rejection to flourish for years. Every aspect of my offer was designed to ensure accountability, transparency, and genuine transformation, rather than temporary relief, followed by a return to previous patterns of behavior. I agreed to establish a medical trust fund that would cover 100% of my mother's cancer treatment costs, including experimental therapies not covered by insurance if they became medically necessary. This fund would be managed by medical professionals and financial advisors, ensuring that the money would be used exclusively for healthcare expenses, rather than general living costs that might enable poor financial planning or continued dependency on external support. The conditions attached to this medical assistance were comprehensive and non-negotiable. Both parents would be required to attend family therapy sessions with a licensed counselor specializing in family dysfunction and emotional abuse. These sessions would focus specifically on understanding how their favoritism toward Tyler and systematic rejection of my achievements had damaged family relationships and created an environment where criminal behavior could flourish unchecked. Tyler's participation in the reconciliation process required the most stringent conditions. He would be required to complete a comprehensive restitution program that included financial literacy education, vocational training, and community service focused on identity theft, prevention, and awareness. More importantly, Tyler would be required to pay me $200 monthly for 10 years as symbolic restitution for the financial and emotional damage his criminal behavior had caused to my credit and peace of mind. The monthly restitution payments were designed to be meaningful enough to ensure Tyler understood the ongoing consequences of his choices, while being achievable through legitimate employment and responsible financial management. This arrangement would serve as a constant reminder of his criminal behavior while providing him with motivation to maintain steady employment and avoid future legal troubles that might interfere with his ability to meet his obligations. Family interactions would be limited to quarterly meetings, supervised by the family therapist, ensuring that any contact would be structured, goal-oriented, and focused on measurable progress toward healthier relationship patterns. These supervised meetings would prevent the kind of manipulation and emotional exploitation that had characterized my childhood, while providing opportunities for genuine reconciliation if all parties demonstrated consistent commitment to personal growth. Most importantly, I maintained my legal identity as Victor Sterling and required my family to address me by my chosen name during all future interactions. This requirement served both practical and symbolic purposes, protecting my new life from contamination by past family dysfunction, while making clear that any relationship would be based on respect for the choices I had made to protect my emotional and professional well-being. Tyler's response to these conditions delivered through his prison counselor was surprisingly positive. His letters from federal prison suggested that his time in incarceration had provided him with perspectives on his behavior that he had never developed during his years of manipulating family dynamics for personal advantage. The rehabilitation programs he was completing included modules on victim impact and personal accountability that seemed to have created genuine insight about the harm his choices had inflicted. His written acknowledgement of responsibility was comprehensive and specific, addressing not only the identity theft and financial fraud, but also the systematic campaign to turn my parents against me and the deliberate sabotage of my graduation ceremony. Tyler's letter included detailed admissions about his motivations for manipulating family relationships and expressions of genuine remorse for the years of emotional abuse he had orchestrated against me. My parents' agreement to the therapeutic conditions was reluctant, but complete. The reality of my mother's medical bills and my father's unemployment had eliminated their ability to negotiate or reject my terms. More importantly, the family therapy sessions began revealing insights about their parenting choices that they had never been forced to examine during the years when Tyler's manipulation provided them with convenient explanations for family conflicts. The medical treatment trust fund I established allowed my mother to access the best available cancer care without the financial stress that might have compromised her recovery. Her oncology team was optimistic about her prognosis, and the treatment plan included both traditional therapies and cutting-edge immunotherapy options that would have been financially impossible without my intervention. The relief on both my parents' faces when they realized her medical care was fully secured was worth the financial investment. 6 months after implementing this strategic reconciliation framework, Tyler was released from federal prison and immediately began his supervised restitution program. His first monthly payment of $200 was accompanied by a letter expressing appreciation for my willingness to give him an opportunity to earn forgiveness through consistent actions rather than empty words. The transformation in his attitude was remarkable, suggesting that his time in prison had genuinely altered his perspective on family relationships and personal responsibility. The quarterly family therapy sessions revealed progress that surprised even me. My parents' acknowledgement of their systematic favoritism and its impact on family relationships demonstrated insights they had never expressed during my childhood. They began understanding how their insecurities about my academic achievements had made them vulnerable to Tyler's manipulation and created an environment where my successes were treated as threats rather than sources of pride. My professional life continued flourishing during this period of carefully managed family reconciliation. The success of my cardiac monitoring patent led to additional research opportunities and consulting arrangements that established me as a recognized leader in biomedical engineering innovation. My relationship with Claire deepened as she witnessed my ability to handle family dysfunction with maturity and strategic thinking, rather than emotional reactivity. The most satisfying aspect of this strategic approach was the complete reversal of family power dynamics. Where I had once been the rejected family member seeking approval and acceptance, I was now the successful adult who controlled the terms of family relationships and determined the conditions under which reconciliation would be possible. This shift had been earned through years of hard work and personal growth, rather than inherited or manipulated through criminal behavior. When Tyler made his 6th consecutive monthly restitution payment and completed his first quarter of community service, I felt a sense of justice that was more satisfying than any revenge could have been. He was learning accountability through consistent actions, while I was rebuilding family relationships on terms that protected my emotional well-being and ensured that past patterns of dysfunction could not be repeated. 3 years after my strategic reconciliation framework was implemented, the transformation of my family relationships had exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. My mother completed her cancer treatment with excellent results, her oncologist declaring her in full remission with a prognosis that included decades of healthy life ahead. The medical trust fund I had established not only covered all her treatment costs, but also provided ongoing monitoring and preventive care that would catch any future health issues early. Tyler's restitution program had become a genuine success story that demonstrated the possibility of meaningful personal change through consistent accountability and professional guidance. His monthly payments of $200 had never been late in 36 months, and his completion of vocational training had led to steady employment as a certified electrician with wages that allowed him to support himself independently while meeting his financial obligations to me. More importantly, Tyler's participation in community service focused on identity theft prevention had evolved into genuine advocacy work that helped other families avoid the kind of financial manipulation he had used against me. His presentations to high school students about the consequences of financial crimes carried an authenticity that made him an effective educator, and his volunteer work with credit counseling services provided him with ongoing accountability for his past criminal behavior. The quarterly family therapy sessions had transformed from tense, supervised meetings into collaborative discussions about family goals and relationship building. Dr. Patricia Stevens, our family counselor, noted in her professional assessment that our family had achieved levels of open communication and mutual respect that exceeded the therapeutic goals we had initially established. The sessions now focused on maintaining healthy boundaries, rather than addressing crisis situations. My parents' growth during this process had been remarkable to witness. Their acknowledgement of the systematic favoritism that had driven me away evolved into active efforts to understand and celebrate the achievements that had once intimidated them. They attended my company's annual recognition dinner, where I received an innovation award, and their pride in my professional success was genuine rather than performative. My father found new employment as a supervisor at a renewable energy company work that utilized his mechanical skills while providing him with a sense of purpose about contributing to environmental solutions. The job paid well enough to restore their financial independence, and they were able to move from their small rental apartment into a modest but comfortable house in a pleasant neighborhood. My relationship with Claire reached a major milestone when I proposed to her during a research conference in Barcelona, presenting her with a ring that incorporated a small diamond alongside a tiny sapphire that matched the blue of her favorite laboratory equipment. Our engagement was celebrated by colleagues who had become genuine friends, and the wedding planning process allowed me to experience the kind of family involvement I had always wanted, but never received during my academic achievements. The wedding itself became a symbol of the healthy family relationships I had built through strategic boundary setting and consistent accountability requirements. Tyler served as a groomsman, a role he had earned through 3 years of reliable restitution payments and genuine personal growth. My parents walked me down the aisle together, their presence representing forgiveness I had granted based on behavioral change, rather than empty promises. Claire's family welcomed me with the kind of immediate acceptance I had never experienced, treating my professional achievements as sources of pride rather than intimidation. Our wedding reception featured toasts that celebrated our scientific careers alongside our personal relationship, creating an atmosphere where intellectual curiosity and academic success were valued rather than resented. The most meaningful aspect of our wedding was the establishment of the Sterling Family Foundation, a charitable organization focused on supporting first-generation college students who face family obstacles in pursuing higher education. The Foundation's mission statement specifically addressed the challenges faced by students whose academic achievements create conflict within families that view education with suspicion or resentment. Our honeymoon research expedition to Costa Rica combined our shared passion for scientific discovery with our commitment to building a marriage based on intellectual partnership and mutual respect. Claire's expertise in biochemistry complemented my biomedical engineering background perfectly, and we spent 2 weeks collaborating on field research while enjoying the kind of relationship I had never believed possible during my years of family dysfunction. Returning to Seattle, as Victor and Claire Sterling felt like the completion of a transformation that had begun years earlier, when I decided to disappear from my family's toxic dynamics, rather than continue accepting their systematic rejection. The life I had built was genuinely successful on every level that mattered to me: professional achievement, meaningful relationships, financial security, and emotional peace that came from being valued for my actual character, rather than manipulated for someone else's advantage. The final restitution payment from Tyler arrived on schedule with a letter expressing gratitude for the opportunity to earn forgiveness through consistent actions rather than temporary apologies. His transformation from the manipulative criminal who had stolen my identity into a responsible adult who understood accountability represented one of the most satisfying outcomes of my strategic response to family betrayal. 6 months after our wedding, I received news that my cardiac monitoring patent had been implemented in hospital systems across the country, potentially saving thousands of lives through earlier detection of cardiac emergencies. The professional recognition this brought included invitations to speak at medical conferences and consulting opportunities with leading healthcare companies, establishing me as a recognized expert in my field. But the achievement that meant most to me was the letter I received from the first recipient of a Sterling Family Foundation scholarship, a young woman whose family had cut off financial support when she chose to pursue biochemical engineering instead of dropping out of college to work in the family restaurant. Her gratitude for the opportunity to continue her education without family pressure reminded me of the value in transforming personal pain into meaningful assistance for others facing similar challenges. Standing in my office 5 years after my parents abandoned my graduation ceremony, I realized that their betrayal had been the catalyst for building a life that exceeded anything I could have achieved if I had continued accepting their dysfunctional treatment as normal family relationships. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic family members is refuse to enable their dysfunction while building something better that demonstrates the possibilities they had been too scared or selfish to support. The lesson I learned through this experience was that love without respect is just manipulation, and respect cannot be demanded or inherited, but must be earned through consistent actions that demonstrate genuine care for another person's well-being. When I demanded both love and respect from my family, I eventually received both, but only after proving that I was willing to walk away from relationships that offered neither. What challenges have you faced with family members who struggled to support your achievements or personal growth? How did you find the strength to maintain your boundaries while building the life you deserved? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with your own experiences, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building meaningful success. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it is possible to transform betrayal into triumph through strategic action and consistent boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to demand the respect and love you deserve in your own relationships.